last week we already talked about how the 7 weeks from Tisha B'Av till Rosh Hashanah are described in Chazal. They're called in Chazal Shiva de Nechamta, 7 weeks of comfort. 7 weeks of comfort. And we talked about at length how what's going on in these 7 weeks. Chazal instituted the Haftorahs, right? The Haftorahs of each of these weeks are coming to comfort the Jewish people in one aspect that we have to suffer through in Galus. And we talked about how these issues, these problems that the Jewish people have to suffer through in Galus, they're not just problems that we suffer through in Galus. These are also things that stand in our way to do proper tshuva. And therefore, this time of year, which is El, beginning of the whole month of El, which is a time to do tshuva and to return to Hashem, to change our ways, to become who we can become. So we have to comfort ourselves. We have to feel a little bit consoled over the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and only when we're consoled and we're comforted by Hashem on what we lost when we lost the Beis Hamikdash, only then can we do proper tshuva. So we have to talk about this week's comfort. What's the comfort of this week? So the Haftarah begins in this week's Haftarah begins with the following words: Rani Akara Lo Yolada. That the Jewish people are called an Akara, a woman who can't give birth, an Akara. So the pasuk says, Rani Akara, that even though you seem to be, the Jewish people, you seem to be a people that can't give birth, you should be happy. Rani, you should sing, you should be happy, even though you seem to be an Akara. So what does this mean? What does it mean that the Jewish people are compared to an Akara, a woman who can't conceive, a woman who can't give birth? And if it's true that we are compared to a woman who can't give birth, why is it that we should be happy then? What does it mean, Rani Akar, that the Akara, the Jewish people who seem to not be able to give birth, should be happy? Okay, so let's talk for a few minutes about a certain aspect of Galus, which is difficult to talk about, so we'll only talk about it for a few minutes, and then we'll come to comfort, we'll come to Nechama, and we'll see how what we're going to talk about tonight is something very, very, very necessary in order to allow us to do proper tshuva, to return to Hashem. The pasuk says in Eicha, regarding exile, the pasuk says, Malka v'sereha bagayim, that the king and all the princes of the Jewish people are in exile, ein Torah. And because of that, because we're in exile, we can't reach the level of Torah that our ancestors reached. We can't reach the level of our ancestors in learning. Or in any level of service of Hashem, we can't reach it. It's impossible. And we know this is something that the Jewish soul carries with it. There's a guilt on our souls that we carry with us from the day we're born to the day we leave this world, that we know there's such a thing called Yeridas Hadoros, that every generation that passes by since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, we become increasingly weaker in the service of Hashem. And this is something that's a yoke, it's a guilt, it's something that weighs heavy on us, whether we realize it consciously or not. You know, the Gemara says about the Amoraim, the authors of the Gemara. The Gemara says that Ketanim shebehem mechayim mesim, that the smallest ones of the Amoraim were able to resurrect the dead. That's how great the Amoraim were. That the smallest amongst them were worthy enough to resurrect the dead. And yet the Gemara says that in Rishayim kamalachim anu kivnei adam, the Gemara, who were people that were able to resurrect the dead, said that the earlier generations, if they were like angels, then we're mere mortals compared to them. And the Gemara goes on further, and if the earlier generations were human beings, were mortals, then we're like donkeys compared to them. So the Gemara, the people of the Gemara who wanted the level to resurrect the dead, they already said about their ancestors that they're nothing compared to them. So all the more so as the generations go on, we seem to be nothing compared to our ancestors. Let me read you something it's an unbelievable thing. Unbelievable thing. You know the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon, the great Rabbi Yoel from Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, Hagoyin HaChassid, he was called by his own colleagues. Hagoyin HaChassid, the genius, the Chassid, lived in the early to mid 1700s. So listen to what Reb Chaim Volozhin. Reb Chaim Volozhin was his greatest student. Listen to how Reb Chaim Volozhin describes the Gra. It's unbelievable. And by Hasidim, a lot of times they exaggerate about their Rebbes and about these things. A Litvak is not going to exaggerate too much. Reb Chaim Volozhiner was, he was a Litvak. He was the original Litvak. And if he says something, he's serious about it. He's not exaggerating. Listen to what he says about the Gra. Listen to this. It's crazy to think. He says like this. He says in our generation, lumberjacks are very few. What does that mean? Lumberjacks are very few. It means those people that are able to, to cut down trees of Gemara, who are able to find their way, find their path in halacha, very, very few. Very, very few. The Ein Tanu Yidei Adma, and no one knows anything, he says. Ad Asher Hu Yisparach L'man Tzidkai. But Hashem, in His infinite kindness, Lahagdil Taras Lahadira, to make His Torah great, Ulharois Niflois Torasa Yisparach, and to show us the wisdom, the wondrous Torah that He has. Hifli Higdal Chaziman, He did a tremendous chesed to us. That what? Va'aru imanani. Listen to these words. Va'aru imanani shemai kivar enash asa. And from heaven, from clouds from heaven, descended the form of a human being. Echad ha'adam ha'gadol, the great person, asher k'mayu lo niyasa, that compared to him there hasn't been mikama v'kama darash olfanav. There hasn't been someone like the Gra in many generations. This is what Chaim Volozhiner says. And Hashem gave him a heart and eyes to see and to understand. And paths of wisdom were clear as day to him. This is what he goes on to say. And he goes on to say unbelievable things about the Gra. He says that when the Gra, we know in Gemara and in Zayar, the Gra made little notes. He made little notes. So let's say to fix a word here, to fix a word there. Chaim Volozhiner says the Gra wouldn't fix a little letter in the Gemara or the Zayar unless that addition, that little fixing that he made answered at least 150 questions. This is what the Gra we're talking about. If you change anything, and how many changes did the Gra make? A lot. Every Gemara, every page of Gemara is filled with the Gra's little additions. Every single addition at least answered 150 questions. We're talking about someone who was on an unbelievable level. He goes on to say something else. He goes on to say that the Gra was worthy, that almost every day Malachim came to visit him and were trying to get and tried to convince him to let them teach him Torah. Malachim came to him and tried to convince him to let him teach him Torah. And he says, Af ki rotzu limsaloi min hashamayim. They wanted from heaven to give over wisdom to the Gra b'lo shemamo v'yigis basar, without any work. They just wanted to reveal mysteries of Torah to the Gra. The Gra in his greatness refused to listen. He turned down Malachim. He turned down angels because he wanted to learn Torah only from his own effort, which was coming from Hashem. And after all this, the story goes that Reb Chaim Volozhiner was sitting amongst other students of the Gra, and the other students of the Gra were saying that the Gra himself is equal to the Rambam. He's equal to Rashi. And Reb Chaim Volozhiner, the same person who just wrote all those crazy things about the Gra, stood up and he said, I have to stop this conversation. Chas v'shalom. You cannot say such, heresy that the Gra was like the Rambam, like Rashi, impossible. Maybe he came close to the Rashba, maybe. But to say that he was like the earlier generations of the Rishonim, the Rambam, it's impossible. We're talking about the Gra, who was one of the greatest of his own generations, of a few generations around him, already was recognized by his great student not to be considered close to the earlier generations. There's a story they say that someone put out a sefer, that in the introduction to the sefer, the guy published it on the birthday of the Rambam. So the guy published the book, and in the introduction he wrote that he's publishing the book, in honor of the Rambam, whatever, in respect for the Rambam. So they brought the sefer to Reb Baruch Ber, to Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. They brought it to Reb Chaim Soloveitchik for his haskama, to see what he thinks. Reb Chaim Soloveitchik took the sefer and threw it at the author. He said, "How do you write such a thing? You think you're anybody to write something that I'm doing this in honor of the Rambam? Who are you to even speak about the Rambam?" He said, "If the Rambam came to this room right now, you'd burst into flames just seeing him." We have no idea how great the early generations were. So there's a terrible guilt. There's a terrible feeling of that. What could we do already? What could we do already? The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Every generation, as much as we try, we're never going to reach the levels of our ancestors. So what's the point? Each and every one of us wants to do tshuva. We want to return to Hashem. We want to become what we can become, but we have a problem. We have a problem. The problem is that we know, as much as we try, we're not going to reach those levels. So what's the purpose of trying even? That's a problem. Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people are called nakara in this haftarah. They're called someone who can't give birth. What does that mean? It means the Jewish people in exile feel that we can't give birth to people that we used to give birth to. The Jewish people used to give birth to unbelievably great people. The Rambam, the times of the Gemara, unbelievably great people, and we feel like we're akaras, that we're women who can't give birth. We can't give over such great things. So that's a terrible yoke. It's a terrible feeling of golus that stops us from wanting to grow at all. Because even if we try, we can't come to anything. So what's the purpose? So this is what the Haftarah is coming to comfort us. That Rani Akara, you think that you're someone who can't give birth to anything great, you should be happy. Listen to what the Medrash says in this week's Namat Pasuk. Listen to what the Medrash says. And it's something we have to understand. The Medrash says that the Nechama, the comfort of this Pasuk, is the following: that Harbe Tzadikim Hamidu B'Churbana, that it's the exact opposite. There are more Tzadikim, there are more great Jews that are born in Golus, Yoisim and Tzadikim Shamidu L'Bibinyana, greater than the earlier generations. There is something about the future, about the later generations, that is even greater than the earlier ones. So what does that mean? So listen to the words of Rav Tzadok HaKohen. This is what he says in this week's parsha. The Isa v'Kisri Arizal. It says in the writings of the Arizal, Sha'amr l'talmido Reb Chaim Vital. He said to his student Reb Chaim Vital the following thing: Shebedor hayasim hazeh, in this orphaned generation, which is 1500 Svat. You know, we're talking about a long time ago already. He said to Reb Chaim Volozhiner that in the 1500s, in this poor generation, Af davar katan sheyisrael oiseh b'kavana l'shem shemayim, the smallest thing that you would do for the sake of heaven, even though it seems small to you, chashuv eitz Hashem yisbarach harbe yoser mimashayu oisim gedolos b'daras rishonim, is greater in the eyes of Hashem than what the earlier generations were able to perform. So even though it's true, the pasuk is saying, even though it's true that we can't necessarily reach the levels of knowledge of Torah as our ancestors, and we don't seem to feel that we reach the levels of service of Hashem as our ancestors. But the pasuk is saying, you think you're barren, you think you can't give birth to anything special. The pasuk is saying it's the exact opposite. Because you feel so small, because you're so far away, even the smallest thing that you do is far greater than anything that could have been accomplished in earlier generations. Why is that? So we all understand very simply. The Gemara says, Kefum Tzara Agra, that based on how difficult something is, that's the reward you get. That's the reward you get based on difficulties. If it's hard to wake up in the morning to daven Shachris, then that Shachris, and a person forces himself and pushes himself to do that, then that Shachris is greater than who knows how many Yom Kippurs of the previous generations. That's what the Arizal was saying to the student, that the small thing that you do in this generation, because it's so dark and because it's so difficult to do even the smallest things, it all the more so adds to its greatness. The Nechama, the comfort of this week's Haftarah is to say that even though it seems to you, and it seems to all of us, that we can't, as much as we try, we can't reach the greatness of our ancestors. The pasuk is saying it, even though in a certain way that's true, you might not be able to reach their knowledge or their levels of service of Hashem, but in a certain way, everything that you do, because it's so difficult and because it seems so insignificant, all the more so is even greater than previous generations. This is something we have to hold on to so strongly. Without this, there's no way to do tshuva. It's impossible for a Jew to want to return to Hashem in this generation, thinking that you can't get anywhere if you try. The comfort of this is to say to the Jew that no, it's not like that. As every generation gets further and further away from the Beis HaMikdash, as every generation gets harder and harder to do even the fundamental things, all the more so everything that we do becomes even more chashiv. You know, the story goes, the Rizhner, Rabbi Yisrael from Rizhin, he was one of the great Hasidic masters, one of the greatest in the mid-1800s. And when it came to Shal Shudis time, he used to, he used to reveal certain secrets about the future generations that during Shal Shudis time. So one Shal Shudis, the story is told that the Rizhner they were singing a song, and the Rizhner got very much, very much connected to Hashem at that moment, a high level of dveikus. And the Rizhner said that there's going to be a time in the future generations where to even have the most simple faith in Hashem, it's going to be as hard as climbing a wall of ice. That's what he said. Before Mashiach comes, having the simple faith is going to be as hard as climbing a wall of ice. And he said in that generation, if a Jew is able to just say Shema in the morning and at night, and do the basics of Yiddishkeit, and just remain religious, the Rizhner said, I swear to you, and he said this a few times until he got the words out, I swear, and he said, I swear by my beard and payas, that a Jew who before Mashiach comes will say Shema in the morning and at night, and will believe in God and be religious as he can, will be as great as me. That's what he said. That's an unbelievable thing. We have no idea. He said before Mashiach comes, This is what he said. Before Mashiach comes, it's not going to be a big deal for the human beings to go to heaven. Physically. I mean, like spaceships. It's not going to be a big deal to go to heaven. But he said, but for a Jew to penetrate into his own neshama and to think about God, that's going to be as difficult. It's going to be as more difficult than going into outer space. That's what he said. But he said a Jew who does anything, who tries, who puts his kaiches in to remain even basically religious, is going to be as great as me. Kefum tzara agra, the more difficult it is, all the more so how special each and everything that we do is. Rani akara, you think that you can't give birth to anything great? It's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. Because it's so difficult in these years, because it's that difficult, all the more so everything that we do is that much more special. So listen. You know, the Medrash says in Shir Hashirim, and this is something, you know, we Jews are known for a lot of things in the world, right? One of the things that we're known for is our guilt, right? Jewish guilt. That's one of the things that especially our women are known for being able to give to us. Good Jewish guilt. And Jewish guilt is something that's it's not a stam thing. We shouldn't think that if there's like stereotypes about the Jewish people, it's like narishkeit. There's truth to it. There's truth to it. There's such a thing that we have a lot of guilt to ourselves, you know, and in a certain way that's a good thing because it makes us more conscious about things, you know, to do the right thing and not to do the wrong thing. We have a lot of guilt. But on the other hand, Jewish guilt sometimes it's a problem. It's a handicap because we sometimes look at ourselves in a negative light. The pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, "Shchar ani v'nava," that I'm black, I'm all covered in dirt, but I'm beautiful. What does that mean? Shchar ani v'nava. So the Medrash says like this. The Medrash says in Shir Hashirim, "Shchar ani lefi einai," that I am black. When I look at myself, the pasuk is saying about the Jewish people that when we look at ourselves as black, full of disgusting garbage. But when Hashem looks at us, He looks at us and sees beautiful things. We sometimes like, you know, bash ourselves in over the head with guilt of thinking that we, you know, even if we try, we can't reach. We're never gonna, you know, what's the purpose of if I put in an extra effort, if I open a chumash for the next 2 minutes? I'm not gonna know the whole thing anyway. What am I gonna gain from it? What am I gonna gain if I push myself to go to shul now? What's the tachlis? What's the tachlis? I daven, I don't seem to get answered anyway. What's the tachlis? Shechayrani, I'm black, I'm disgusting, I'm covered from head to toe with guilt, head to toe with garbage. But the pasuk is saying v'nava. That's not true. It's not true. Because we feel so far, because we are in such a low generation, because it's so difficult to even believe in the basics. So all the more so, if we believe in it and we struggle and we fight and we do the best we can, all the more so how special it is. You know, Nachman Breslev said that the generation before Mashiach, the great test of the generation before Mashiach is going to be simple faith. That's what he said. That's what he said, simple faith. And he said, interesting, he said, don't think that the fact that I'm saying this now is going to strengthen anybody's faith later on. It's not going to, that's how difficult it's going to be. That even if they see how prophetic I am by saying that later, that in the future generations it's going to be all about faith, that's still not going to help. It's still not going to, that's going to be how difficult it is. If you think about it. We see it with our own eyes. Such things, clear signs of Mashiach, clear signs of Hashem. We're talking about, if you think about it, it's the year 2011, right? What is it? 70 years ago, the Jewish people were almost completely destroyed. Do we understand what happened in World War II? Do we have an idea of the destruction that our people went through? And what happened immediately after? The state of Israel, an entire government, not only do we survive it, but we reached heights. There's more yeshivas, there's more learning this day than there's been in 2,000 years. Right after, we were almost completely obliterated. Is there any greater miracle than that? Is that not greater than Kriyas Yamsuf? Kriyas Yamsuf is a one-moment thing. God split the sea, we go through. Very nice. This is our entire people. In one moment, were completely destroyed. The same people who were in Auschwitz were able to fight Arabs and establish a... It's an unbelievable thing. It's mamish nisan. But look how heavy, how difficult it is to believe in God. That even after we see all that, it's still terribly difficult to do even the simple things. And that doesn't mean to take away from us. It's the exact opposite. That's how difficult living in our generation is. That's how difficult the test Hashem put our neshamas into. And all the more so if we push and we hold on to this simple faith of our ancestors that there's a God in heaven, and everything that we do in life and everything that happens to us in life is destined by Hashem and decreed in heaven for it to happen for a reason, then all the more so how great we are. We have no idea how special it is to even hold on to the most simple things. And we shouldn't think for a second that if a person has questions about God or questions about faith and struggles with why is it that bad things happen to good people and vice versa, that that's a sign of any weakness. Let me tell you, there's a story that happens with Rav Nachman Breslover. Someone once came to Rav Nachman and just sort of admitted that he's having problems with Emunah. He's having difficulties, struggling with faith, trying to come to terms with the world around him, why Jews suffer and all these types of things. And he felt very guilty about it because he was raised as a Jew, as a frum Jew. You're not supposed to ask questions. Rav Nachman said it's the exact opposite. It's for people like you, Rav Nachman said, the world was created. Listen to this. This is what Rav Nachman writes. He says, "V'chizek Oisei Rabbeinu." The Rav Nachman comforted him. He says, "Shakol hishavas ma'aseh bereishis," that the entire creation of the universe, hayarak b'shul mashetzafa Hashem Yisbarach, shiyu nashim shiyu lahem yisurim b'din hamunah kedosha. The entire purpose of creation was just to have people that struggle in faith, and even struggling. That's an unbelievable madrega because it means that you're interested in it, right? That's what it means. If you didn't care about God, you didn't care about Yiddishkeit, then you wouldn't have struggle with issues. You just forget the whole thing and go on your merry way, like 99% of the population out there. The very fact that a Jew struggles with these things, and it bothers him that he doesn't live the way he knows he should live, that itself shows an unbelievable level. We have no idea. We beat ourselves over the head with guilt and with feelings of insecurity, but we don't realize that itself comes from an unbelievably deep place. The Zohar says in Parashat Shmos, listen, the Zohar says, and this is talking about exile. The Zohar says, Rabbi Yehuda said, Ilimali havayoidin b'nei nasha. If human beings knew, Rachimusa derachim kucharich Yisrael, the love that Hashem has to the Jewish people at all times, hayushagin kekifrai lemerdaf habesrei, they would lose their minds running after Hashem. That's what the Zohar says. If we knew how worthy we are, how important it is, every single thing that every krech that a Jew makes, every struggle that a person has to go through, every Shema that a person says, every Shemona Esrei a person davens, every pasuk a person reads, every Rashi a person struggles to understand. We have no idea how important, how special these things are. And when Mashiach will come, it will be revealed that even though we might not have as much knowledge as our previous generations, we might not be able to claim, our Shemona Esreis might not be as long. But nonetheless, there's going to be certain greatness that we will have over all previous generations, dafka because it's so difficult. Listen, Rav Nachman said on another occasion, and this is something we have to carry with ourselves also. He says, the fundamental point is when a person even davens to Hashem to give him strength in faith. Please God, let me believe in you. He says, that itself is faith. That itself comes from a good place. Even though he has many questions and many doubts, and he struggles constantly, nonetheless, even if in his heart he cries out to Hashem, if deep down in your subconscious you're crying, you're not happy with the way you are, that itself is coming. That means found in you is a tremendously holy spark. If a person is even bothered by it, look at the nations of the world. Are they bothered with the fact that they're so distant from Hashem? No. Even if a person told them how distant they are, it wouldn't make a difference because there's nothing inside of them. But by us, the Jewish people, we're filled with guilt. The Gemara says that afilu rishayim, that even the wicked of the Jewish people, Muleim Charata Kariman, they're filled with regret. Filled with regret. And that's a great schus. It's a great schus that we have, because it shows that we're still alive. It's an unbelievable thing. The story goes that I don't know if it's a true story, I don't know. But it's probably not. But whatever. The story goes that there was a group of Hasidim sitting around the table, and this is going back, supposedly it's going back early 1900s. So the story goes, a group of Hasidim sitting around the table, and they're all talking about how great their Rebbes are. That, I think I might have said this before once, but anyway. this chassid says, oh, my Rebbe is so great, he performed this and this miracle. He split a river, whatever. Another chassid says, oh, my Rebbe is great, he's able to know what you're even thinking before you think it. So they're sitting around, every chassid is saying unbelievable things about their Rebbe, and there's a Lubavitcher chassid at the table, and he's quiet the whole time, not saying anything. So they ask him, what about your Rebbe? I'm sure, what miracles has your Rebbe ever performed? So the Lubavitcher chassid thinks to himself, he says, the truth is, I don't recall any miracle my Rebbe ever did. And the truth is, by Chabad, by Lubavitch, they're not very big into miracles. That was never the tradition. They're never very big into that. In fact, the story goes that the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, people asked him, what miracles did you see by the Baal Shem Tov? So the Baal Tanya would always answer that I was too busy learning. I didn't pay attention to any miracles. It was never part of their thing to really care about miracles. So anyway, so the Lubavitcher said, I didn't see any miracles. So they said to him, I can't be. You got to have seen something. It's impossible. You're ever such a great tzaddik. You have to see one miracle. So he thought about it for a minute, and he said, what? Yeah, okay, there is one miracle I saw. He said, what's the story? The story is that the Lubavitcher chassid said that he was in the lumber business for a certain period of time, whatever. And he had a business partner who was a Litvak. And the Litvak came to him one day and said that he was just offered to invest in a certain lumber deal, whatever it was, and it seems to be that it's going to be a very profitable business deal. So he's offering his friend the Lubavitcher to get involved also. So the Lubavitcher said, listen, let me ask my Rebbe first for advice in business, and if he gives the okay, then I'll invest with you. So Litvak laughs about, okay, let's go. What do you ever know about lumber? So okay, fine. He goes to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, it's terrible. I see it's not going to be matzliach. Don't get involved. Okay. So he goes back to the Litvak and he says, listen, I don't know what to tell you. My Rebbe said it's not a good idea. I can't do it. So Litvak laughs, what are you talking about? The Rebbe doesn't know. What does he know about lumber? I'm telling you, this is going to be a good deal. But I said, listen, I can't do it. Fine. Okay. So but the Lubavitcher said, listen, but I'm not stopping you. If you want to get involved, then gesundheit. So Litvak says, yeah, I'll get involved. No problem. So lo and behold, what happens? The business deal is extremely successful. Extremely successful, and the Litvak makes a lot of money. Lubavitcher does, he didn't get involved, so he didn't make any money. And that's what the Lubavitcher is saying to the group at the table of Chassidim. They're like, what type of miracle? It's the exact opposite. The Rebbe got it wrong. So he said, nah, the miracle is that I'm still a Lubavitcher chassid. That's the miracle. That's the Jewish people in exile. That's mamish us. That's mamish us. We see it's so difficult. We see everything, on the one hand, even though we see great things, we see the Jewish people have control of Israel, and we see unbelievable siyat d'shmai. But on the other hand, there's a lot of difficulties. We see a lot of Jews out there that suffer. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions that we have throughout the years of exile. At the end of the day, Mashiach isn't here. We have a lot of questions. The greatest miracle, the most unbelievable point of greatness in us is that the fact that we're still religious, we're still Jews. That's an unbelievable miracle on our behalf, and we're worthy of that. That's an unbelievable thing. We should never belittle ourselves into thinking that, what are we? At the end of the day, what do I know already? I know what? One pasuk in Chumash, I know nothing. The answer is, but you know what it means to know one pasuk in Chumash in this generation? Where it's a nace that you're even religious, to know anything, to struggle, to even want to know more? It's an unbelievable thing. We beat ourselves up, we push ourselves down. It's not the way it should be. That's what the pasuk is comforting us. Running akar. That you think you're people who can't give birth to anything great is the exact opposite. You should be happy. And this week, this comfort, this point of comfort, is the 5th week. It's the 5th week of the 7 weeks. And the 7 weeks of comfort. It's taught in the Svarim that the 7 weeks of comfort also correspond to the 7 days of creation. What's the 5th day of creation? What was created on the 5th day? Amongst other things, fish. Fish was created on the 5th day. Right? What's significant about fish? Always in Chazal. Significant about fish is that they have a bracha of pru revu, of being fruitful, to multiply. Right? Pru revu. Fill the world. Hashem said to Adam and Chava, fill the world like fish. So that's the nechama of this week corresponds to that bracha. That even though it seems to us that we're not fruitful, it seems to us that we don't accomplish anything. The answer is that even though we're not accomplishing, we don't seem to accomplish much in amounts of knowledge and all that, but in quality, maybe not in quantity, but in quality of what it is that a Jew could accomplish, even in the smallest things, it's unbelievable. Things that previous generations were unable to do. Rashi's neshama was sent into his generation because he wouldn't be able to survive in our generation. Our souls were sent into this era, into this generation, into this place, because we're able to deal with it. And that's something we have to remember. Something we have to remember always. And that's something that's very, very special, very, very important to remember. And if we internalize this well, then we'll be able to do tshuva. Because the fact that, again, like we said before, one of the major obstacles in returning to Hashem is the feeling that we're not going to get anywhere anyway. The answer is we have to be mechazik ourselves that it's not so. Even the smallest effort that we put in is immeasurably significant. Immeasurably significant. Let me end off with another story. The story goes, I mentioned the Rishner. Besides being someone who, during Shal Shudas, was sort of prophetic, another interesting thing about him was that he was very, very, very wealthy. Very, very wealthy. And one of the major events by the Rishner, I think I might have mentioned the story too, so I apologize if any of you have heard it. But, there's only so many stories I know, The story goes, anyway, so one of the major things that he would have was his Purim Suda. His Purim Suda was very, very big, very huge, very elaborate, very expensive, and everybody, if you were able to make it, that was the place to be Purim. That was the place to be Purim. And all the Barchan and the Jewish comedians, I don't know if they were any good, but whatever, that was the place to go, that was the place, to show off their best material, whatever. So the story goes that one Purim, as the people started to come into the Rishner, they found that instead of the Rishner sitting by the table and dancing and singing and being happy on Purim, he was sitting on the floor like Tisha B'Av. Sitting on the floor like Tisha B'Av. So, okay, that's kind of strange and awkward, but okay, whatever. People still came in, sat around the table, and they're just sitting there quietly. The Rishner is not doing anything. He's literally sitting on the floor and crying like Tisha B'Av. And this goes on for some time. And people are, they're still drinking a little bit, but it's not, you can't really get into the party when the Rebbe is sitting on the floor like that. So until finally one of the comedians who was very excited about performing by the Rishner, he maybe had a little bit, already a lot to drink, and he summoned up the nerve, and he decided, even though the Rishner is sitting on the floor like Tisha B'Av, listen, I'm going to still do my bit, So he got up on the table and started performing, and people were laughing, it got a little bit late, but again, still, the Rishner is still crying. It's not as good as it could be. So the comedian is drinking a little bit more and more, and he finally gets up the courage to confront the Rishner. And he gets on the floor to the Rishner and he says, you know what? It's not good to be a Rishner chassid in this world or the next. It's not good to be a chassid of yours in this world or the next. But to be a chassid of Rabbi Naftali Rupshitzer, who was like a colleague of the Rishner, then it's great to be a Rupshitzer chassid in this world and the next. Why? He said, what happens? What happens if I'm a Rupshitzer chassid, a chassid of your colleague? What happens in this world? If I go visit the Rebbe, I get a hug. It's very nice. He's very warm to me. He comes over. He asks me how my week was. It's gewaldig. It's great. It's great. I feel energized by seeing him. And what happens after 120 years? I'm going to go to heaven, and the angels are going to ask me, "No, Rabbi, who are you?" He said, "Listen, I'm a chassid of Rav Naftali Rupshitzer." Oh wow, Rav Naftali Rupshitzer. You had a relationship with him? Yeah, sure. When I went to him every single time, he talked to me. Shmooze. It was very nice. Okay, fine, sir. Okay, come right into Gan Eden. Very nice. So it's great to be a Rupshitzer chassid in this world and the next. But to be your chassid, a Rishner chassid, it's terrible in this world and the next. Why? In this world, if I try to come close to the Rebbe, the Gabbai throws me halfway across the Beis Medrash. I don't talk to you. I don't have anything to do with you. And the one time in year where it's like sort of geschmack is Purim, and you're sitting on the floor like Tisha B'Av. So in this world, it's terrible. And what's going to be in the next world? I'm going to come to heaven, and they're going to ask me, "Who are you?" I'm going to say, "I'm a Rishner chassid." They're going to say, "Rishner chassid, very nice. You had a connection to him?" Not really. We made eye contact once, but that was about it. So what type of chassid? You're nothing. So you don't have his merit. So it's terrible to be your chassid in this world and the next. And after the Rishner heard this, he got very, very upset. He said, "You know what? I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask you guys to come. You're eating my food, drinking my liquor. I didn't ask for it. You could all get out. If you like Rupshit so much, go to Rupshit's. I don't need this. I never asked it." So the comedian sat down on the floor and started crying with the Rav, and he said, "You know what? Even though it's difficult in this world and the next to be your chassid, but we refuse to leave you. Because, Rebbe, you're the truth. You're the real deal. You're the real deal." And after hearing that, the Rishner got up, sat down on a chair, made l'chaim, and he started Purim. So after the whole party was over, so the Chassidim, his students, went over to him like, what's going on? What just happened? So he said the reason why I was sitting on like it was Tisha B'Av was because I knew that in heaven there was a terrible decree hanging over the Jewish people, and I was doing everything I could to annul it. I was pleading on their behalf. I was doing everything I could to get rid of this decree, but nothing. It wasn't working. And when I realized that the decree was signed and sealed, nothing was going to do. I was sitting like Tisha B'Av because I knew what terrible destruction was going to befall the Jewish people after Purim. But when this comedian said what he said to me, at the same time I was talking to God, and I said, you know what, Hashem, it's terrible to be a chassid of yours in this world and the next. Why? In this world, we get nothing but grief from the non-Jews. We have nothing but terrible tsaras. We don't feel your presence. We don't see you. We don't seem to have a relationship with you. It's hard to be a Jew in this world. And the next world, we're going to get up to heaven and they're going to say, "Nu Yid, who are you?" "Oh, I'm a chassid of Hashem." A chassid of Hashem. You ever spoke to him? You had a shaykhis to him? You had a relationship with him? Not really. So it's hard to be a Jew in this world and the next. But I said to Hashem, but you know what? At the end of the day, we're not leaving you. Why? Like the comedian said to me, because Hashem, you're the truth. You're the truth. And he said with that statement that I made to Hashem, that even though it's difficult, we're not going to budge from your presence, that I was able to annul the decree, and I was able to have a happy Purim with everybody else. This is what we have to take out of this week's Haftarah, that in order to do proper tshuva, in order to come close to Hashem, we have to realize the truth, which is that because everything we do is so difficult, because everything we do, we have to put in so much energy, it's because of that it's unbelievably, immeasurably significant in the eyes of Hashem. And even though we seem to be people that can't give birth to greatness, it's the exact opposite. We're giving birth to greatness at every moment that we believe in Hashem. Every moment we're as great as the Rishner himself, as we said before. So with this, we should be mechazik ourselves, and we'll come to Rosh Hashanah with that, with happiness and with joy, with a recognition that we have true greatness within ourselves. And with that, we'll definitely be able to do proper tshuva, and we'll be able to see through our tshuva. Bias Mashiach Zakeinu v'meher v'yameinu. Amen.